Hello, guys, and welcome to the latest episode of the MSC Performance Podcast with me, Mark Coulson, and Max Hartman. Today, we are very much looking forward to talking a little bit about rest and recovery protocols in regards to your training. So it's one of the questions that's come up from our members, and it's always it's quite a kind of regular question that pops up. You know, how long should I be resting between sets? What shall I, how many days a week should I be resting around the training? Do I need to rest after a lifting day or after a conditioning day? So we're going to start off talking in the micro of rest between sets, then into rest days per week. Then we're going to talk a little bit about deload weeks and taper weeks, even taking a complete break for a week, and sort of evolve from there. So, first of all, how are we doing, Max? Welcome back to the podcast.
Always good to be on. Yeah, very good, very good. Busy few weeks, great start to the year. Really, really good January so far. I think for myself personally, business-wise, for the gym, everyone seems to be cracking on really well. Classes are going really well. Great buzz in Barbell Club this morning with the groups there, 6 and 7 a.m. So yeah, just a really good positive start to the year.
Definitely positive. I think in the Barbell Club, like especially this week, we're starting to just ramp up a notch with the training. Obviously, we spoke a little bit on the podcast before about the importance of kind of being sensible as we're building back into our training after a bit of a break, or most people having a bit of a break at Christmas. So just being very sensible with that progressive overload and just not aiming necessarily too high at the beginning, just getting consistency back, doing the basics. But this week, with the way we've programmed it, and I've definitely noticed in the gym in both the mornings and the evening groups, like just the temperature's just been nudged up just a little bit. Did you find that this morning?
Yeah, and it's a first week where, and this probably speaks a lot to some of the kind of the stuff that we'll come on to talking about recovery and whatnot. There's a few people this week for the first time in the new year, coming towards the back end of the week. It's Thursday. There's a few people starting to come in instead of having that normal kind of buzz where everyone's fresh, everyone's getting straight into it. It's the first time when people are coming in and they're creaking a little bit. They said, I'm struggling a bit today, just a little bit sore, a little bit tired. But I think with those guys, it's probably the guys that have done, or the men and women that have done, a lot of Barbell Club throughout the week. They stick into the Barbell Club program. They're then supplementing that with Metcon, or they're supplementing that with their own training. And it's fantastic that, we're getting towards the back end of the month. It's new year, new me territory, where people are really, really working hard and people are grafting and getting a lot. And it's taken, 4 weeks for people to start saying, I'm a little bit sore, I'm a little bit tired. But then they start lifting, they're still progressing, they're still able to build on what they're doing, they're still hitting the right RPE. So although they're kind of coming in and they're starting to feel themselves creaking a little bit, it's still very, very manageable, and it's still at a level where they're tolerating it, and that kind of fatigue is almost designed and built into the program on purpose. Since the last week of the first 4-week cycle,
sure,
probably get a little bit of a back off.
Yeah,
exactly. So it's it's quite nice and quite balanced in that respect. But you can see that, like I said, it was the first time this morning where a couple of people came in and said, I'm a little bit sore, I'm a little bit tired. 4 weeks in, that's great. That's kind of spot on. That's kind of where we want it to be. But it's treading the right side of it. They're coming in, they're still cracking on, still managing to get the work done. I'm sure a lot of them will still be here tomorrow at 6 a.m. for Metcon.
Absolutely, and the RPE scale helps a lot with that as well in terms of how we monitor the load. We've kind of over the last few years in the strength conditioning community come away a little bit from, not neglected them completely, there's still a time and a place, but come away a little bit from percentages and saying, right, you've got to come in and hit 80% of your 1 rep max for 3 sets of 5 or whatever it is. And that RPE scale just allows that little bit of, for some of these guys in Barbell Club, obviously, as we've said in the programming, we're trying to cause some fatigue at the moment. Yeah, exactly. And for some guys, that's maybe a little bit new. Some guys we know will react to that fatigue a little bit better than others, and therefore the RPE scale there just gives us that flexible template to just work from on a more individual basis.
Yeah, and it's, again, especially if you're new to training, if you've never been in the gym before, this is your first 4-week cycle, who's going to be able to go off percentages for a lateral raise? Yeah. Who's going to know where their intensity is? So if nothing else, it really boils it down and says, like, right, how hard should this exercise feel? So if you can say, right, okay, this is a 9 RPE, this is sets of 10, this is sets of 12. Okay, I get it. I should be working really hard on this. Whereas at other times, it might be there's sets of 3 or sets of 5, but okay, we're only cooking at a 7 RPE, so it's starting to get heavy, but it's still very much, it should be within the realms of comfort. So it immediately and intuitively, even if you're not kind of up to date on what your rep maxes are, and you can't work back from 100% and equate what your 4 rep max and your 3 rep max is, intuitively straight away it gives you a lot of information as to like, how should I feel doing this set.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's a very, very simple, it boils it down into one principle. How should this set feel?
100%. I think with the rest as well, it's just such a key part of the overall structure of training. Like if you're someone who's very inconsistent in the gym, you probably don't need to worry too much about it. But if you are a consistent trainer, which we find most of our guys are, it is a massively essential part of training. When you're, to put it in simple terms, you're coming into the gym, you're essentially tearing and breaking down muscle fibers through your training, and then in your rest and your recovery and your nutrition is where you're essentially rebuilding, growing. Building and growing new muscle fibers. So it is important. Like you need your rest, you need your recovery, you need to get those kind of things correct. We're not necessarily going to go into like the 1%ers today of massage, rolling, things like that, but like we are going to go into like the important aspects,
nuts and bolts, the meat and potatoes,
the meat and potatoes,
the low hanging fruit.
Crikey, wow, the low hanging fruit, low hanging fruit of rest and recovery. And it's we'll divulge into even weeks, and do we take a week, deload weeks, things like that. I'm actually taking a deload week with my own training at the moment because I haven't been playing with the injury. I've not had a deload week for a couple of blocks now, but it was the right time to just scale back a little bit and just feel so good for it. Like already with Thursday back end of the week, and it's like, wow, yeah, a deload week is like a bloody useful.
It's a real thing.
It's like, I know it works. I've been doing it for 15 years, but like it's good to have that active reminder of like, wow, this is not, and it's like a nice treat to have your sessions a little bit shorter and things like that. So been keeping the intensity like around the same, to be honest, but just dropping the volume down, obviously, like 20-30%. So dropping a set basically for all the exercises, but we'll get into that a little bit later. Should we start with the absolute basics? You get a lot of people, even experienced gym goers, say, how long should I be resting between sets? We myself and Lou gave our listeners a bit of a bollocking for being on the phones too much in between in between sets and things like that. I got myself into a real bad habit of doing it, of like, having a rest in between set and sending an email, or like scrolling Instagram, and then I've given myself a slap on the face and sorted that out, and now leave the phone in the office, train, and I'm really enjoying training because of it. And I've had a lot of good feedback from that podcast of like, wow, such a simple thing. Like our phones consume our lives these days. And just to actually put that away for a bit, train, enjoy the atmosphere, like have a bit of, God forbid, a bit of thinking time to let yourself actually
have to talk to someone.
You might have to talk to someone. It's crazy. That's something we spoke about in your rest period, just trying to be a bit more mindful and a bit more mentally prepared for the next set, be in the moment a little bit more. But for our listeners now, do you want to just divulge into like timings and
there was always this old I think when I was a spring chicken first getting into the gym and starting to lift weights, I was kind of long time ago, mate. I'm 30 soon, so that feels like a long time ago, but there was always this kind of idea that if you wanted to get strong, you'd rest for 5 minutes in sets. If you wanted to get big, it was like 60-second rest because you build up more fatigue, you get a bigger pump or whatnot. But we just know that's not the case, and from sort of intuitively as well, whether you're reading a paper and you're looking at scientifically the sort of literature says, or just intuitively from feeling out your own training over time, there's going to be this big trade-off, as you say. If you're sending emails between sets and you're resting 5, 6, 7 minutes, there's only so tuned in that you can be to that session. There's only so committed to that session you can be, and there's only so far you can go with that. There's only so much intensity you can bring to it. Whereas conversely, if you're only resting 30 to 60 seconds between heavy sets of squats or heavy sets of deadlifts, there's only so long before you're going to start missing reps. If you're down for 3 hard sets or 4 hard sets of 6 or 4 hard sets of 5 on an RDL, and you give yourself 30 seconds rest, there's no way you're getting those reps. It might be a set of 6, and then it's a set of 4, and then it's a set of 1, and then it's a set of 1, and it drops right off. So generally speaking, literature-wise, and then intuitively from those that kind of have done a lot of training, we know that realistically anywhere from 2 to 3 minutes is pretty much spot on.
Yeah.
When we're talking about size, when we're talking about strength, because it's that nice toss up between actually you're resting long enough to kind of resynthesize some of the components and the fuel for high intensity exercise.
Yes.
You're resting long enough that realistically, if you're doing 4 or 5 sets, you should be able to get your reps out on all of them, assuming you're selecting the weight properly. But again, it's not so long that you're not fully invested in that session.
100%.
That being said, I think if you go back to some of the old school, like Poliquin principles, that kind of stuff, if you're really training for like body composition, or, you're really just out and out trying to get a big calorie burn, trying to expend a lot of energy, or you may be towards the back end of the session, you're doing a lot of accessory work, isolation stuff, then there's a time and a place for a lot of density and cutting the rest down, getting a lot of work done in a short space of time. And there is times that there's a good application for that. From a body composition perspective, like I say, if you just want a lot of work in a short space of time to really build up fatigue at the end of a session, then perfect.
Yes.
If you're looking at sports performance and you're in a certain phase where you're looking to work kind of the endurance capacity or muscular endurance, however you want work capacity, however you want to label it, of a certain muscle group, because your sport demands that you have that, then a lot of work in a short space of time, getting to a lot of fatigue in a given muscle group is a useful tool. But with density, with a lot of work in a short space of time, comes a lot of fatigue. You've got to recognise that, and there's a trade-off. Exactly.
Yeah, you've got to pay the price for the load. So we would recommend, for example, when you're trying to get stronger in your squats, your deadlifts, you're not going to be taking a minute rest in between sets. No. If you're throwing in your accessory work, your lat raises, your curls, your push downs, things like that at the end, by all means, have at it. If you're doing a bit of a, I don't like the phrase, but like your general prep phase or something off season, you want to get around with some bigger exercises, even you can work at a higher tempo. So I think we're talking 90% of people, 90% of the time, we're probably looking at 2 to 3 minutes as the benchmark. If you need a bit more, take a bit more. Ain't going to kill you. If you're happy to crack on and you need a bit less, have a bit less, but just be wary of, look, if you're trying to push the strength aspects, which is obviously what we're big components of, is, adding load to the barbell and, getting stronger, then just be wary that if you cut that rest down too short, then you're just not going to have you're not going to have the rest recovery, the replenishment to go again and hit those top sets. There's definitely people that fall outside of that. What you'll find is, like, generally speaking, the heavier the load that someone's lifting, the more rest and recovery you're going to need. And that goes up with, like, for example, like if you're a heavyweight powerlifter and you're deadlifting 300 kilos plus, for example, your rests and you're working at 1 rep max, or you're working singles, doubles, triples, you may well be taking 10 minutes rest, per set. It's the same with top end Olympic lifters as well. They won't be taking as long because the time and attention isn't as much as a power lifter, but they may still take a longer recovery period. And even your lighter power lifters as well, if they're lifting heavy load, like, they'll generally need a bit more recovery. But I think we could safely say for most people most of the time, 2 to 3 minutes is it's about on the money. Save yourself some time if you want, if you're in a rush, by doing some density work, upper body wise, no dramas. I think, like, in terms of accessories, getting your push pull done, supersetting, something I like to do a lot. If I'm doing upper body accessory work, just push straight into pull, then a bit of recovery, and then we go again. So I think that probably nips the rest protocols in terms of the micro. In fact, actually, it might be worth, just in terms of we talked about strength training there, but in terms of conditioning as well, should we sort of go into that? Sprinting, obviously, longer recoveries. If we're working aerobically, obviously shorter recoveries. People sometimes get a little bit confused with that in terms of, right, when I'm doing conditioning, what kind of, how long should I work for? How long should I rest for?
Yeah, and it's something that even that kind of trade-off that we spoke about there with strength training of shorter rest probably equates to the fact that you can do less work. That effect is probably magnified even more so when you're talking about conditioning, when you're talking about aerobic work, anaerobic intervals, that kind of thing. High intensity intervals is the phrase that gets thrown around all the time. And I think that effect is magnified and it's even more obvious when you look at conditioning work. Again, from a sports performance perspective, getting caught in that middle ground of kind of trying to work hard, trying to work hard, but not resting long enough, or trying to make your intervals too long. And you end up just doing a bunch of junk, moderate intensity, really, really tiring work. Is the trap that people fall into. Whereas actually, like I say, the need to almost do your conditioning how a powerlifter does their lifting, where you work incredibly hard for a short space of time and then rest for a long time in between it. So again, how hard can you sprint on a bike for 6 seconds, and then basically can you just be completely still for 2 minutes while you recover? Yeah,
you're not gonna common mistake you see people make is to do the 6 seconds, for example,
and then rest for 10
for 10 seconds or 20 seconds.
Yeah,
the old Tabata style of we're working high intensity, but are we really? No.
Yeah, exactly. And if that's
ends up just being aerobic and not even good aerobic work, because there's no volume, there's no capacity.
Exactly. I know I kind of said that that applies to a watt bike sprint, but if you're doing sprints on feet, I think that's even more obvious. I think a good rule of thumb, if you're doing max speed sprinting, you almost want a kind of general rule is almost a minute of rest for every 10 meters you do.
Yes.
If you're doing something that's even, a 30 or 40 meter sprint, you're talking about 4 minutes of rest.
Yeah.
For something that takes 2 to 3 seconds.
And again, the faster you are, the more highly tuned you are, like the longer rest, like you,
exactly.
Your top, elite sprinters will have 8 to 12 minutes.
An hour's session, they do next to nothing, but the outputs are enormous.
Do you ever train like a track athlete who's like a middle distance or long distance run? They hate sprinters.
Oh yeah.
Because they come in, roll around and stretch for 45 minutes.
100 meters over an hour.
And then
go home.
And then rest. What a life.
And they're the biggest guys on the track. But,
and they look the best.
Yeah. But then, you get into the kind of the other end of things where people then do again get lost in the weeds. They think, I need to do aerobic work, or they end up doing, they do a WOD, they do a CrossFit type stuff. I think Metcon's a little bit different because we're not actively using that a lot of time for out and out sports performance. And even then the Metcons that we program it are kind of zoned quite nicely, I think.
Low skill.
Exactly. But a lot of time people just don't do those high days high enough. We've said this a million times in the podcast. The high days don't go high enough, and the low days don't go low enough. If you're doing aerobic work, you should confidently and comfortably be able to maintain a conversation while you're doing that. Assuming you're doing your kind of low level aerobic. There's a time to really push, and a time
unless
to
you're doing
high lactate stuff.
Yeah, a few weeks a year you might do some mass style. Hard aerobic.
But kind of coming back to what we're talking about from a stress and recovery perspective, if you're really kind of dialed in with what stress you're applying and what stimulus you're giving the body, and like I say, you're thinking about your work to rest ratios, you're thinking about your work intervals, you're thinking about your rest periods, that allows you to quantify the stress you put on your body. It allows you to then recover properly in session and after the session as well, between sessions. But it kind of speaks to this idea of, the first step of rest and recovery is actually just training properly in the first place.
Yes.
You don't have to recover that hard from a session that actually was dosed appropriately in the first place. And that's the number one spot, I think, that I think would, if we're framing this as a kind of, a chat and a podcast about rest and recovery in the first place, that's almost top of the list. You can't recover from something that is, no matter how good your recovery is, no matter how much your foam rolling, stretching, if you just do too much in the first place, you're going to feel crap. You can always put a cake back in the oven, but once it's burnt, it's burnt.
Philosophy 101.
There you go.
Beautiful.
Well, but yeah, it's doing the right amount in the first place is really, really key. And then making sure you're kind of almost compartmentalizing those sessions and saying, right, today is a day where I'm going to work extremely hard. My lifting is going to be heavy with 3 minutes of rest in between, and my conditioning is going to be 6 to 10 second sprints on the bike. I'm going to take anywhere from 1 to 2 minutes rest in between. It's really, really high effort, high output stuff, but actually, you're not applying that stress incorrectly. You're doing it in a way that is actually probably manageable for your body.
Yes.
And then I'm going to follow that up the next day with really, really steady aerobic work, which is, almost steady state is 4 or 5 minute intervals with 1 or 2 minutes of rest in between, that kind of thing, where I'm using heart rate as a guide, or I'm using RPE as a guide, and I'm making sure I'm in the right zone.
Yeah.
So it's in the first place, you're just putting a little bit of thought into training and how you actually apply stress, and it makes it much easier to recover from in the first place.
Yeah, a lot of guys, they'll do the high day, if you like. They do the hard day, they lift heavy, they do some high intensity work with the conditioning, whether it's sprints, whether it's a hard conditioning session, hard lactate, anaerobic, whatever it is. They'll do that high day, and then they'll come in the next day and they'll try and replicate it. We'll try and work hard again, and then what you have is you just have this no man's land of like, you're just battered. So you're not really, you kind of think you're working hard and you're slogging it, but you're actually not improving your strength, you're not improving your speed, you're not improving your your lactate capacity or whatever you're working on, and you just kind of banging your head against the wall, really.
One area where I think that's actually, and something that I've kind of come around to, that conversation we just had is very much from the strength and conditioning coach's perspective, isn't it? That's if we're dealing with an athlete who is, by definition, in need of maximal outputs. It's a sprinter that needs to run as fast as possible. It's a rugby player that needs to hit as hard as possible and maintain as much output as they can over 80 minutes.
Yeah.
It's a football player that needs to be able to sprint hard and do that over and over again for an hour and a half. This is working on maximal outputs for athletes, whereas that kind of middle ground, which is kind of a lot of volume, not a lot of rest, a lot of fatigue, actually, for kind of Gen Pop clients who are coming in and they want to shift a bit of body weight. They've come in after Christmas and they want to lose some unwanted poundage. I actually think that recent years, I've come around to the idea that for them, it's actually almost the best kind of training.
It keeps them from not
kind
of pushing and it's too much load.
It's probably, if you were to look at it purely from a caloric output perspective, how much energy can you use, how many calories can you burn in 1 hour or in 45 minutes? It's probably actually the best way of doing it. It's probably the biggest output. It's not massively repeatable. Like I said, you're not going to be able to come in and do massive outputs and do that every single day of the week because you're going to be fried. But again, if you're Gen Pop and you want to come in and work hard and sweat for an hour 3 times a week, that kind of work is actually probably perfect. Knowing, taking it for what it is, knowing what the cost of it is, and knowing how to apply that stress, and think, what, actually, this isn't going to make me run faster. Well, I'm sure it will do for a lot of people, but it's not going to get me to run the fastest I could possibly run. It's not the best way to train speed.
You're coming in, you're burning some calories, you're
doing
a good bit,
and you're probably having fun doing it as well.
Yeah, true.
It's it's a very good way of getting a lot of work done in a short space of time, and it fits nicely, I think, for a lot of people with general body composition goals.
Yeah.
And so I think it can be very, very useful in that respect.
But like you say, you've just got to accept that you're maybe not going to be able to, if you're looking to particularly get very strong or very fast or very well conditioned, in whatever it is. It's probably not the optimal. But as you say, in terms of like 9 till 5 in the office, coming in, wanting to get some work done, it's not a bad way of doing it.
Not at all.
I think like go back to the like athletic stance of it, like I think most athletes who aren't in the know will come in and do that as well, and not hit the high days and the low days. And I think
I think just performance in a sport dictates the need for a completely individualized program, and something that is tailored around, okay, when's your technical tactical training, when have you got football training, when have you got rugby training, if you're a marathon runner, when's your long run of the week, or when are your hard intervals. Okay, let's plan everything else around that. And again, like I say, talking about stress and recovery and rest and recovery, it speaks to that as well. These sessions have got to be planned and put into the training week, not just for an appropriate time or for an appropriate amount of sets or for an appropriate training volume, But okay, how does that factor into the day before and the day after? What's the cost of that? How long is it going to take us to recover? Because ultimately, like, so whatever your sport is, you're not doing the sport so that you can lift the weights. You're lifting weights and doing the conditioning so that you're better at your sport.
Yeah.
So it kind of defeats the object if you're doing really big conditioning session, really, really hard intervals, and the next day you go to football training and you can't move.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because ultimately it's, well, skills pay the bills, as they say.
Pay the bills.
Be a PhD footballer if that's what you're going to be, and then use the weights and the conditioning to make sure you're robust enough to not get injured.
Yeah, that's the essence of it. What about we get a few questions asked every now and again about deload weeks and things like this. How important do you think a deload week is? How regularly would you normally put those in for your guys?
Generally speaking, it's very much on a case by case basis.
Yeah.
So you do get some program models or textbooks or kind of training cycles where it's almost 4 weeks deload, 4 weeks deload, 4 weeks deload. Whereas in reality, a lot of people don't train hard enough to get to that point.
No.
And again, if you're training around sports performance goal, or if you're training for just general body composition and, like I say, maximal outputs on your primary concern, and you are taking care of the stimulus you're putting through your body in the first place, a lot of people will not train hard enough or will not be at a level where they require a deload every 4 weeks. So you can often, on a case by case basis, if you're recognizing certain signs that you need a deload, if you're not progressing very well, if you're not motivated to get into the gym, if you're feeling tired, if you notice when you are in the gym, you kind of sliding backwards a little bit, they're all kind of symptoms of overtraining. Yeah. They're all symptoms of excessive fatigue. And it's just recognizing that. I was actually having a conversation with Jo in the barbell club this morning. And she was asking, is it too much to come in and do barbell club 3 days a week? And then on the days off, is it too much to then come and do Metcon? So you're doing barbell, Metcon, barbell, Metcon. And I said, again, it depends. If you're
very individual.
If you're motivated to be here and actually you're getting up at 5:30 in the morning to be in the gym at 6 o'clock, you're doing it every day and you feel good and you've got a smile on your face while you're doing it, chances are you probably don't need a deload because you're here, you're enjoying it. Look at your program, the weights are going up nicely. What was a 7 RPE last week is now 6 RPE this week, or if you're in 7 RPE last week and 7 RPE this week, but the weight's gone up, chances are you're progressing, you're recovering appropriately to the point where it's allowing you to progress each week.
And you're fine with your Metcons. You don't need to deload.
Exactly. So a generic idea of, right, okay, every 4 weeks we have to back off and have a week of easy training. People are just losing 20% of their training volume. Or people are losing 1 week in every 5 where they could just be building. So looking at these different measures, how you feel, how you sleep in, how your recovery is, what your body weight's doing, whether or not you're progressing in the gym, they're all clues as to how much fatigue am I building up, how much fatigue am I accumulating, and how much am I able to actually recover from the stress that I'm putting through my body. And again, like I said, chances are if you're in training at 6 o'clock in the morning, you got a smile on your face and the weights are going up, crack on, keep doing it.
Years and years ago, like, I used to be very stringent in my programming, and it'd be every 4th week, would be deload without fail, religiously. I think we've all sort of learned that, programming and, it should be more flexible. The RP is an example of that. What we've just spoke about in terms of it depends how you're feeling, how you're recovering. That's why we do in the barbell club, the questionnaires weekly to monitor people's fatigues on an individual basis. With my own training with my individual clients now, it's a lot more flexible with the deload. It's very rarely every 4 weeks these days. It's it might be every 8 weeks, might be every 12 weeks, might be every 4 weeks. And it's I've got an athlete at the moment who's wants that deload will expect that deload every 4th week, and you're in season, you're actually doing about 9 sets a session, a very low amount of volume. Do we need to knock off another 20-30% on the deload week and then run the risk of becoming detrained and underloading? So it's a real fine balance, and it's it's not the holy grail that maybe we once thought it was. However, it's still
useful tool.
Very useful when it's needed. But I think with that, it's a case of just being a little bit more kind of flexible and monitor how you're feeling a little bit better, over time. If you're like, if you're a powerlifter, like prepping for a comp, you might be a little bit more strict with it, because you are coming in and you're very much trying to work up to a, it might be a percentage, or it might be an 8 RP or a 9 RP on a particular movement, and then that the next week you're going to need a bit of a deload, or you've done a certain amount of volume, you need to deload, and even taper, which is a bit of a different thing, because tapering for a competition, you might need to be strict then with with the deloads, but generally speaking, like, it's a lot better to be flexible, with it. I think that's rest protocols done.
The other one that I'd chuck in there, and I think is something that always comes up with a lot of people, is recovery sessions, or specifically adding in recovery work, and it's something that almost similar to a deload. It's a really, really kind of weird, interesting toss up. Whereas the amount of times where you can come in, feel terrible, feel battered, feel beaten up, and jump on a foam roller, do a little bit of aerobic work, do some kind of corrective exercises, walk out the gym feeling great and feeling loose. That's a real thing. That's a real training effect. But one thing that I'm often really kind of careful with when I'm prescribing those is, you got to really ask the question of, if someone's coming to you and saying, "Oh, can I have a recovery session? Can I have some corrective, some extra work to do?" You've got to really dive into why they need that, and you think,
have a day off.
Are they doing too much already?
Yeah.
Regardless of how low the stress of a recovery session is it essentially just stress on top of stress that they're already not recovering from?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Again, it's probably more of an individual thing.
Yeah, exactly.
With this, kind of thing. Some people are already doing more than enough. The last thing they want to do is like make the journey into the gym, like, do correctives, do, whatever it is, like they don't need it, they don't need the corrective work, don't need the mobility, don't need the aerobic stimulus. You're better off just having a day off, or just going for a walk.
Get some sunlight, get outside.
Yeah, exactly. I used to quite like coming in on a Sunday after a game. And again, it's not right or wrong. Like, it can work very well coming on a Sunday and after a game and loosening up a little bit and things like that. I found for me personally, I actually, maybe it's because, obviously I work in a gym and I'm here a lot. I actually much prefer just staying away from the gym on a Sunday and going for a long walk. And I feel much better for like literally just like a long walk, a hike or something like that. Fresh air, like that for me gives me a better recovery, or makes me feel a lot better.
Yeah,
and there's a mental thing probably as well of like just hard rugby game, gentle walk, gym Monday, ready to go again.
And I think if it's something that is almost kind of programmed in regularly as part of your program, and it is, all that work is covered on your low days, then it shouldn't be a question of, on a ad hoc basis, I'm really struggling this week, I need to add another session to recover. Actually, you should get all of that done, and your fatigue should be manageable in the first place. Right? Okay, the corrective work and the aerobic work is done on the low days.
Yeah.
So if you've got that Sunday programmed in, you said, you know what, I've got a really, really tight fixture schedule. It's more applicable probably to football and basketball than it is to rugby. But sometimes if you're playing 2 or 3 games a week, you need to have certain days off. But it might be that your Sunday is one of the only chances where you can get your low day work in. So that's actually right. Saturday's match day, Sunday is programmed as a training day, but it's just sufficiently low that you can still get some work done, some beneficial stuff done.
Yeah, well, we've worked with footballers before. Like that's a big one where, like, in season, a lot of the time they're playing twice a week.
Yeah,
and because they're playing twice a week, there's a lot of field-based stuff, a lot of tactical work they need to do. The gym work's fairly minimal, and you've got like maybe 1 session or 2 sessions a week in the gym, might be 40 minutes each to get work done. So you might have that game day plus 1, the day after, as actually we're going to get you in the gym. Yeah. We're going to do some like low level ISO stuff. We're going to do some, correctives, bit of microdosing on certain things. And that's actually a much better thing to do than just a complete rest day. It's like, well, it's a good opportunity.
Wait till you're overcooked and then try and add in that
recovery session. Exactly. So things to consider. But again, it's as with most things in training, in strength conditioning, it's it does come down to individual needs, individual situations,
individual tolerance
as well.
Training
tolerance.
History. The individual is key, and catering to the individual using scientific methods and tailoring them to the situation and the context that you see in front of you and the person that you see in front of you is key. It's not one size fits all. Got all the same. So don't burn the cake, so to speak.
Don't burn
like
the
you
cake.
say.
Wow.
But the poison's in the dose.
Poison's in the dose.
I'm sure there's more.
There's been some bangers today. Absolute bangers. Fantastic. I think we'll round it up there, guys. Thank you very much for listening. In terms of things coming up at MSC, in fact, the latest thing is new stash. Lots of new stash, more winter stash, as it is still January. We can't wait to get the spring stash in, but more winter stash for now, more hoodies. We have got some good t-shirts as well, some jumpers, things like that. Get yourself stashed up. We have the Metcon Games, which has been announced. So absolutely buzzing for that.
Civil War.
Marvel theme, Civil War, fancy dress.
Oh.
I'm going full Iron Man outfit, which I need to look for. I think Sonia's going to be Thanos. and
Luke will be Ant-Man.
Luke's Ant-Man. So he's going to nibble at that.
Oh,
Be
no.
furious. So buzzing for that. It's going to be brilliant. The Metcon Games is always awesome. We've only done it a couple of times, but it has been absolutely awesome both times. We can't wait for the 3rd edition. It's going to be mega. So it's coming up soon. Entries are open. So speak to one of the team, get your entry in. Entry fee includes the t-shirt for the day. It's going to be a mega event, big social afterwards. More details come on that. Get yourself involved. It's going to be a big day, and if you don't want to compete, that's fine. Just come down and watch and get amongst it. Fantastic. Fantastic. Good luck to Jazz, who's competing at the British Championships on Saturday. So Jazz has been training really well, really excited. He's one of the good guys in life.
He's dialed in.
He's dialed in, man.
He's
a competitor.
Yeah.
He's a fierce competitor. Nicest bloke you'll ever meet. When it's time to get on the dance floor, it's business. I watched Jazz at the British a couple of years ago, pre-COVID. Must have been 2019 British champs where he won. And it was generally like the best live sport I've ever seen. And I've been lucky enough to see some good live sport, but like he did an absolutely monstrous 18-kilo jump on his last lift, won the title, won the British. So good luck to Jazz. Good luck to Jazz on Saturday, British weightlifting champs. And also Jodie Hughes, former member as well, will be coming down from Scotland to compete in that. Good luck to her and everyone else, all the other competitors who are taking part. Buzzing for it. Hopefully it brings back the gold medal. Thanks for tuning in, guys, and we'll catch you next week.
Catch you soon. Thanks for having me.
Peace out.